When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With twinspires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with twinspires. And now you can race to victory with twinspires tournaments.
Hello and welcome to the twinspires Racing Roundtable. It's a two-man crew this week with Ashley Anderson unexpectedly off. I'm Vance Hanson, joined as always by James Scully. Like I said, two-man crew on the roundtable this week, more of a debating society than a forum, but we're going to swing it here without Ashley. And our three topics this week, we talked extensively last week about Dwayne Lukas's retirement, and now the legendary Hall of Fame trainer passed over the weekend. We'll have some final thoughts on that. And we'll talk about the big racing this past weekend at Churchill Downs, covering the Stephen Foster Stakes and Thorpedo Anna's bounce-back victory in the Fleur-de-Lis. And James, we'll start off with Dwayne Lukas's passing Saturday night at the age of 89, a transcending figure in horse racing. And as I said, we covered his career and our favorite highlights of his career extensively on the roundtable last week. And just some final thoughts on Wayne Lukas, what he meant to the sport, and anything else you want to add about his legendary life, James.
Yeah, we like you said, we had the opportunity. I tell you, when I heard that news, Vance, on Sunday morning or early Sunday afternoon that Dwayne Lukas had passed away, I just thought, it sort of reminded me of Bear Bryant, where as soon as Bear Bryant retired from coaching, it was, I know it may have been a little bit weeks instead of just 1 week, but just passed away and was gone. And, just a legendary figure like that, Lukas was. I talked about it last week, where I was lucky to follow his entire career. I was a kid. I was watching the Preakness, the first Preakness he won with Codex. And I thought, like, over the next nearly 2 decades, the rest of especially starting in the mid-'80s, all the way through the early 2000s, he changed thoroughbred racing, with his work ethic, his hard driving, personality, and laser focus on success. He worked hard, and he had great success. He retired all-time leading winner of Breeders' Cup races, won 4 Kentucky Derbies, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought that in the second half of his, over the next final 2 decades of his training career, Vance, I thought it was really also a pleasure to watch Lukas just develop into such a statesman for the industry. I mean, he was the most recognizable figure and really just almost beloved by everybody. And, he just had such considering he didn't get into training horse races until he was in his early 40s, it was just remarkable what he was able to do and how he was able to carry himself. I was real always, had an opportunity to talk to him. I think I mentioned previously, he talked about when he first went to horse sales, people were still buying horses based on pedigrees, and how he was there to buy confirmation and buy winners, and just shipping horses, cross country, et cetera, and just the way he tutored trainers. I think he was just unique. He changed the game, like we've said, and he'll truly be missed.
Yeah, you just alluded to one of the great assets that he had was a great eye for the athlete and the racehorse. And I read a story where he kind of ignored the pedigree on a catalog page before or until after he kind of looked at the horse physically, and kind of gave them a rating system after that. So, but that was one of the unique gifts that he had, his eye for horse flesh. Yeah, just a legendary character of the racetrack, no doubt about it. And as you said, over the last 20 or so years of his career, his focus, his personality changed. He became more of a statesman, as you said. Some of the brashness didn't entirely disappear, but it became a more welcoming attribute, not only to the fan base but also the media. Um, and one last thing I'd like to bring up, and it was probably something I could have brought up last week as well, but there was one horse of his way back that really stood out to me, and unfortunately, he didn't have an opportunity to show his true talents. But one horse of Lucas's that I will always hold dear to me was a 2-year-old named Grand Canyon, who raced for W.T. Young. He was a 2-year-old in 1989. Very physically monstrous horse. Lukas said he weighed over 1,200 pounds. He was also a bit immature, but he looked like a very promising horse, especially going into the 1990 Kentucky Derby season. As a 2-year-old, Grand Canyon had won the Norfolk Stakes at Santa Anita very greenly. Then he ran in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, didn't get the best of trips and finished second to Rhythm, who wound up being named champion 2-year-old. But Grand Canyon, I think, had a lot of I would say a lot of support from others for that juvenile title based on what he did after the Breeders' Cup. He won the Kentucky Jockey Club at Churchill by 10 lengths, and then he ran and won the Hollywood Futurity, which was run over a one-turn mile back in those days, and he won by over 6 lengths, and the final time was 1:33, which was one of the fastest one-mile races you'll ever see a 2-year-old run. And back then, Brisnet.com was the sole provider of Beyer speed figures, and the Beyer boys gave Grand Canyon a 106 for that performance. So even though he lost the juvenile championship that year, Grand Canyon was the future book favorite for the 1990 Kentucky Derby, which was eventually won by Unbridled. And unfortunately, Grand Canyon was injured coming out of the Hollywood Futurity. He didn't make it back to the races, and ultimately he lost his life in the summer of 1990 due to laminitis. So I think when I think of Lukas, I think of Grand Canyon and what could possibly have been perhaps his best runner if the fates had been kinder. But going back to Lukas, a true horseman, lots of champions, lots of memories over the last 40 to 50 years that it's given all of us, and surely someone we'll miss in the years and decades ahead.
And he had a filly like that, an ill-fated filly that was superbly talented too, Landalucy. She was from her first stock crop. I mean, she was one of his first big horses, and she unfortunately passed away before getting to really go on and have potentially just a huge racing career. I'm glad that you mentioned W.T. Young. Lukas, he he worked. He was the first one at the barn, last one to leave, kind of work ethic. But he also, during the races, he was known for wearing these $1,000 suits and aviator shades. And he courted and had W.T. Young, Eugene Klein, all these wealthy owners. Trained dance floor for MC Hammer. But the one thing that, the stories I've heard over the last week, Vance, just from the general public, I co-host a radio show and had a bunch of people call in and talk about this, was how accessible he was. People went up and talked to him at the track or in the barns or in the backstretch, and he always would talk to them. And not only that, but I heard stories from people who they met him in a chicken place in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and he recognized them a decade later, that kind of thing. He loved people. It didn't matter where you came from. He was famous for always picking a child out of the stands and bringing it to the winner's circle to let them enjoy that feeling. The way he loved and cared about others, really, everybody got to see that in the final, I thought, decades of his racing career.
Yeah, I've heard similar stories from friends of mine. One of them mentioned to me that she was was on the Oaklawn Park backstretch some 20 years ago after Lukas acquired Horse of the Year Azeri, and he was out grazing Azeri on the backside, and she was hesitant to approach him because she was so nervous to be in his presence. But once she did, he said that, or she said that he talked with her and swapped stories with her for an hour or two, which was a terrific first meeting and a great memory for her. So, yeah, Wayne Lukas, a people person, loved the attention, loved the spotlight, loved talk. Maybe not loving talking to the media, but always had something to say to a lot of folks throughout the industry, and a figure that will be, like I said, sadly missed, and one that we will never forget and will not be forgotten as long as this game exists.
Well said.
Moving on to the racing action of this past weekend, Stephen Foster Day was the main point of focus, and that was at Churchill Downs. And the Stephen Foster Stakes, Grade 1 for older horses, was the top race. And I'll bat it back to you, James. What were your takeaways from Mindframe's victory over Sierra Leone and other Grade 1 quality stars?
Yeah, I thought it was an outstanding win. Who's the best horse in training presently is quite debatable, but there's no doubt this was an outstanding field. The strong, one of the strongest fields we've seen so far. 5 of the horses were millionaires. 4 of them were Grade 1 winners. Had the Breeders' Cup Classic winner in there, and last year's Kentucky Derby winner. So lots of real classy field. And I thought Mindframe, ran a terrific race. First Mission got out there to the lead all by himself, was dictating terms. He sat second. And when, he made his move, turning for home, Mindframe really responded. He not only responded, but, he ran straight through the stretch. I mean, we had seen it last year in both the Belmont Stakes and Haskell, where he ran second to Dornick, that he'd get to the top of the stretch and he'd be drifting out. And I don't think it was a matter of him being tired per se. I think just real immature. And he's grown as a 4-year-old. He's now 3 for 3 this year. I think his comeback, his second win, his first Grade 1 appearance this year on that Churchill Downs Stakes, I think that win's going to flatter him too, Vance. We'll see. Nisos could do a lot of good things this year, and he beat Nisos. He beat Bookham Danham and Bookham Dano and Milligan, who've come back to run 1-2 in a Grade 1 at Saratoga. He's beaten 2 good fields. Obviously, in the 7 furlong race, he got up right on the wire. But this one, he wins pretty comfortably. This belated late run by Sierra Leone is we've seen those a million times. They can be false. You can't trust that horse. But he's going to win. He's going to win one of these days. That's the thing about him. You don't know when, but it's going to happen eventually, probably. But I would put Sierra Leone, the front runner right now for Horse of the Year, at least, for champion older male. Obviously, Sovereignty's out there in the 3-year-old division, but if he stays healthy, at some point he'll run against older horses, and that will be settled at that point. But right now, Mindframe, especially with Fierceness, Wida Barrio, Locked, and all coming off of losses. Those are some of the big stakes winners we've seen this year. Mindframe's in the pole position, but all this will get settled in the second half of the season, but still a very good win. Also, 104 Brisnet speed, 102 late pace numbers. I was pleased to see him get good numbers for that effort, Vance.
Yeah, good win by Mindframe. Certainly in a better frame of mind this year. As you said, he's grown out of his earlier immaturity. This division is still wide open. We'll find out more in the Whitney at Saratoga. If you had to make me choose between Todd Pletcher's top horses, I think I would still take Fierceness, even off that loss in the Met Mile. I still think he's probably the horse to beat this summer, but his stablemate here, as you said, he's got great tactical foot. He's kind of almost like Fierceness in running style. sometimes. So that should be a terrific showdown if both of them show up in the Whitney, which I suspect will be the case. Sierra Leone, yeah, another typical performance by him, good enough for second and third. He just doesn't have the tactical foot to keep up with the competition in races like this. And a mile and an eighth simply is too short for him. I mean, he desperately needs mile and a quarter races, I think. And unfortunately, unlike the 1980s, the mile and a quarter races simply aren't a dime a dozen in the older male ranks anymore. I suppose they will run him in the Whitney for sure. Maybe they'll want to bring him back in the Jockey Club Gold Cup too. But other than that, your East Coast options over a mile and a quarter going into the Breeders' Cup Classic are relatively slim to none otherwise. So I wouldn't put it past Sierra Leone for repeating in the Breeders' Cup Classic just because of the distance, and he did it before at Del Mar last fall. But yeah, I just think Todd Pletcher has got the horses to beat in this division. One other note I'll make here is Mystic Dan just had another perfect trip in this race as he did in the Blame Stakes last month, but he showed absolutely no kick whatsoever, even though he had a huge gap on the inside. So, with those kind of easy circumstances for him to pull out another win, and he didn't come close to doing that, I think he is seemingly and obviously a cut or two below the top older runners in this division.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He got a good trip, Mystic Dan, and he did make a move, off the turn down on the inside. He tried to challenge Mind Frame. It looked like he could be second for a second. I thought it mid-stretch. And then just to get nailed for third by First Mission, who he ran by, just was like he was really tired at the end of it. So he's going to have to keep stepping it up, but I do think I think you've made a really good point. Pletcher's, I mean, he's got locked running in the Suburban this weekend, and he's not at the same level as Fierceness and Mindframe perhaps right now, but he's got a chance to get there. So he's got some really good older horses.
Very loaded. And our final topic this week, we'll go a little bit earlier on the Stephen Foster card to the Fleur de Lis Stakes, which was a big comeback win for the reigning horse of the year, Thorpedo Anna, after a dull last place performance in the La Troyenne. And after the race, you had a chance to talk with trainer Kenny McPeak, James, and if not with you, but certainly with others, he kind of talked about this filly's summer campaign. She's going to aim for the personal ensign at Saratoga, then prep for the Breeders' Cup and the Spinster Stakes at Keeneland. And then he said possibly he could consider her for the Breeders' Cup Classic against the boys. What do you make of that potentiality, James? And do you really think she's going to show up in the Classic?
Well, I think there's a chance of it, if she does win those two races. Now, do I think that she can win the Classic? I mean, she's going to have to get faster in those races, Vance. This year's been a little bit underwhelming. I mean, she's won 2 of her 3 starts, three of her 4 starts, but they haven't come back fast. She hasn't taken a step forward number-wise as a 4-year-old. Now, obviously, she had that issue in the La Troyenne. Kenny McPeak ran her back on 3 weeks rest there, and it backfired miserably, and she got all bounced around early and just sort of spit the bit. So this was a huge race for her in a sense. I mean, she had to come back and had to, run a good race in a sense, in order for her to keep building upon it for this fall. So she got the job done, I thought, in good order here. It was good to see her draw off from Royal Spa, who had won the prep race for this last month. And, she ran about a second, she went in 148.2 and Mind Frame went in like 147.2. So she got a decent number, a 98 Brisnet speed. Let's see if she can keep building upon it, because the competition, should get tougher in the personal ensign and in the Spinster potentially this fall. And she's got to look good in those races for McPeak to even take on the males. She won't be able to back into Horse of the Year honors this year by running in the distaff, though. And if he wants to take on males, I do think the Classic would be the most likely option. It's just she's got something to show to me before I say she belongs there.
Yeah, I agree on nearly all of those points. Speed-wise, you're right. She has not made a huge step forward as a 4-year-old. And, I think the one factor that would sway McPeak towards running her in the Classic, it would be to kind of neutralize her position as the Eclipse Award winner as champion older mare. I don't think he wants to risk potentially losing that Eclipse Award in the Breeders' Cup Distaff if she happens to run up against, perhaps a California-based older fillier mare who if she loses the distaff to, could wind up getting more votes than her in the Eclipse Award race. So if she can run the table in the Personal Ensign and the Spinster on top of her wins that she has already this year, she might kind of cement in the eyes of most voters the older mare championship. And by running her against males in the Classic, he can avoid her potentially losing to somebody else and then thus losing the Eclipse Award. So I think that might come into play. We'll see what happens over the next few months, but I think that would be the only real argument for her running in the Classic against males, because right now I don't think she's quite at the top level of some of the horses we just previously talked about.
Yeah, and I don't know if the one thing we've certainly seen. Even in this Fleur-de-Lis, but I thought in the Apple Blossom. I thought like the other top 3-year-old older fillies of mares that were like seemingly ready for a race at that time, instead of running in the Grade 1 against Thorpedo Anna, they went and ran the Grade 3 Double Dog Dare at Keeneland. So if the competition doesn't show for those next 2 races, then I guess they might not be that tough a test. And what you're saying would absolutely make sense. The only reason she would have perhaps to run in the distaff is if somebody beat her and she needed, was looking to turn the tables on them. But otherwise, that would be if she was to win those races and there was somebody else that was winning other races that would have a chance to perhaps get out, edge her because they won the lone head-to-head matchup. That would be a pretty savvy move by McPeak.
Absolutely, and we've seen it before. Thinking back to maybe Havre de Grace, when she ran in the Breeders' Cup Classic a while back.
Yeah, she would have. That was a tough distaff field. Royal Delta, I think, unbridled a lane out of it. Yeah, that was a tough field.
Yeah, that would have been a stellar showdown, but which we didn't get to see. But I think it worked out for everybody involved. And so, but nonetheless, it's good to see Thorpedo Anna back in the winner's circle, and we look forward to her next couple of starts at the Spa and here in Lexington at Keeneland. So that's all the time we have for this week's Racing Roundtable. Hopefully, Ashley Anderson will be back hosting next week, and we'll cover all of the action. We've got Saratoga opening up this weekend, Indiana Derby also among the 3-year-old features. So until next week, have a good week, everyone, and we'll see you next week on the Racing Roundtable.
When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With twinspires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with twinspires. And now you can race to victory with twinspires tournaments.